Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to the Business Innovators Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Brown. My guest today is Purdeep Sangha, himself a podcaster and founder of the Male Entrepreneur Podcast. He's an award-winning author. His book, Superfans, How to Create Unwavering Customer Loyalty, is available via Amazon, and he's an authority on performance psychology, mindfulness, leadership, and business growth, as well as in the science and art of self-mastery, all of which are excellent topics as we head into this new year and new decade. Purdeep joins us today to talk about these concepts and about how he helps men succeed in business, despite being oversold that quote-unquote hustle mentality. Purdeep, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad you're here with us today. I think it's a great topic for the new year. Folks are kind of resetting and trying to figure out how to get to the next step. So that's what I want to get into today. But first, let's start off by having you a little better define who your ideal client is.
Yeah, wow. That's a really great question. So I work obviously specifically with men, although I do have some female clients, but I work with men, mainly family men. So family men between the ages of 30 to 60, they have children, they have an established business. So they're at least a couple of years in, or maybe even a year in terms of their business, and they want to grow it. But they're also at a state where they don't want to sacrifice themselves. They know that there's a better path. They don't want to sit there and work for the rest of their lives just hustling and grinding and just trying to put everything into it and not get the results that they want. So it's really about having a life where they have fulfillment, not only in their business, but also in their personal life. So I say it's I'm not going to say out specific names, but there's a bunch of influencers on social media these days are all about hustle and grinding, and they get the young 20-year-olds out there that are super, excited about spending their entire life working seven days a week, 16-hour days. That's not the crowd that really follows me. It's a crowd that says, I have a family. You know what? I want more. I want to be able to spend time with my kids and enjoy my relationship. Those are the kinds of people that I work with.
Fair enough, but I want to challenge you a little bit here. Now, you're known as the mentor for men in business, right? And you say that the majority of your clients are men. Let's be honest, Purdeep, this is not a particular, popular time in our culture. It's not sexy to say, I'm here to help the men. You know what I'm saying? There's, with the Me Too movement, everything that's going on in our current culture, do you face those kind of challenges?
Oh, absolutely. And that's purposely why I came out with the Male Entrepreneur. It was really to make a statement, because if we take a look at what's happening with men right now, it is a very challenging time to be a man, and men don't have the same resources that women do from an entrepreneurial side. There's a ton of groups out there that work specifically with women. There's very few that work specifically with men. And men are at a tough state because they don't openly share their challenges. And for them to share their challenges in front of other guys, wow, that's a completely different story. So that's why I've created this environment, this community, is for guys that can share their challenges, share the solutions with their fellow brothers, for example, in a very safe environment. But that's exactly the reason why I'm doing this, because right now, a lot of men are feeling like they don't know how to be a man. And not only is that impacting them on the business side, but it's impacting them on their personal side, in the personal life as well, because they don't know what it's like to be a man in a relationship these days, and especially what it means to be a father. And so how do you raise two children, for example, whether it's a boy or a girl? How do I teach them? What do I teach them to be, or how to be, or how to act if I myself as a man don't? Because as you mentioned, there's so much happening right now when it comes to the Me Too movement. And I'm totally for equality and inclusivity, for example, and diversity. But what has happened now is we've shifted to a completely different side of the pendulum, where men are afraid to be men. And interestingly enough, Rick, we're at the 50% mark where we're getting just as many referrals from women saying, please help my man out. He needs your work. He needs your help.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting, because if you take a look at the work that I'm doing, when people hear the Male Entrepreneur, when I first came out with it, it was really interesting. I had these t-shirts made and my friends were like, wow, that's an awesome t-shirt. I want one. But some of my friends even said, hey, you know what, Pradeep, I'm afraid to wear that t-shirt because I have female clients and I don't know how they're going to take it. So that told me right away that I had to hit the nail on the spot, because men, even my own friends, are afraid to be men and to stand up from that standpoint. And so when women hear it, the first reaction that they get is, oh, the male entrepreneur, like this guy's a chauvinist, he's a sexist, or whatever it is. But when they sit down and they see what I'm trying to help men do, that's when they're like, immediate, this is exactly what happens. I need you to help my man, or how can my husband get a hold of you? And because a lot of women these days are looking for stronger men. And you'll talk to a lot of women that will say, well, yeah, what happened? Like my husband just doesn't have any, I don't want to say the word, but, guts, for example. Or he's spending all his time at work and, not enough time in family. So can you help him out from that standpoint? So all in all, to sum it up, it's really to help men live a healthier life so they can be better husbands and be better fathers, so we can raise healthier children, because we need that in society these days.
Yeah, and I think if I'm kind of hearing you and reading you correctly, we're not even necessarily talking about external factors of male versus female. It's not a sex versus sex thing. It's right. It's more intrinsic.
Exactly. And what has happened now is we do have a sex versus sex battle right now between men and women. It's really, from a society standpoint, it's unfortunate because it's hurting a lot of people, but this really is about internal. And it's about internal, it's about learning. And one of the things I talk about a lot with guys is I show them how to leverage their emotions. So a lot of people think that guys, they're just not sensitive. They don't have, they don't feel as much. That's not true, because I can share the neuroscience behind it. Men feel just as much as women, but we have a part of our brain that actually switches over to the logical side a lot faster than women do. And so we become problem solvers almost immediately, because that's how our brain is actually programmed. But we're just as emotional. We want intimacy just as much as women. We feel just like women. And so when I show men how to leverage their emotions, because most men and a lot of women have not been taught how to leverage their emotions. And so most people are controlled by their emotions and trapped by their emotions. But if you can actually understand how your emotions work and leverage them, you become that much more powerful. And that's the work that I do specifically with men.
And you talk a lot about self-mastery. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all about self-mastery, because we as human beings live life in three particular ways, or we experience life in three particular ways. One is we think, so we have thoughts. The second is we feel, so we have emotions. And the third one is we sense. And so we have these five senses, and that's all about energy. And so here's how most people live out their lives, especially men, is, they're go-getters, they're thinking a thought, they're aligned from a thought perspective, but their emotions are not aligned. And their energy might not be aligned either, because they're just hustling and grinding, and they're not spending enough time recharging themselves, whether it's emotionally, physically, spiritually. And so they're not aligned. So most people live their life out of alignment in one of those three areas. Either their thoughts are not aligned, their emotions are not aligned, or their energy levels are not aligned. And when you're not aligned, you're not living to the full potential, and you're not being truly fulfilled. So I talk to a lot of guys that say, hey, look, they're go-getters. They're like, I got this goal, I got it down. But then I ask them, how do you feel about it? And then they'll sit there and be like, I'm kind of afraid, or I'm frustrated. Sometimes I feel guilty because I'm spending so much time trying to get to this work or business goal, and I'm not spending enough time with my family. So anytime you do that, you're taking yourself out of alignment, and you're actually reducing your level of ability to impact your life and your future.
So how do you draw that balance then? Because this is a real thing, and I've experienced it. I'm sure you've experienced it, especially when you're a young entrepreneur, a young business owner trying to get this thing off the ground. Yeah, we hear the gurus tell you to hustle, 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 bang it out, Where do you find that balance, or how do you find that balance when you've got to put so much time, effort, and resources into getting your business off the ground, while at the same time continuing to be the husband and the father that you want to be?
Yeah, really great question. So it took me 2 decades. I really put a system together to really focus on those three areas: the thoughts, the emotions, and basically the energy levels. But here's the reality. Just like anything else in life, you have to take it in what I call sprints. So you can't continuously hustle all the time, because you're going to burn yourself out. And burnout is a real thing, especially for men. They'd rather burn out than actually ask for help. So I call them business sprints, or even life sprints. You work You grind for 5 days in your business and you take the weekends off. Or you grind for a month in your business and you take a week off. You have to have a recharge time. You have to take a look at it in sprints. It's important. If you can build your business in sprints, you're going to be that much more successful. Here's what we end up doing, though, is we end up working either evenings or weekends or more than we want to because we believe that that effort is actually leading to more outcomes, when in reality, it's not, because you don't have the efficiency levels past a certain energy point. You're not working as effectively. So you might be working evenings, for example, but you're working at 50% capacity or 60% capacity. And so you're not getting the same output. And so it's our natural tendency to say, we need to work harder. And that is just not the right way to work, because you can work harder in sprints, yes, but if you're going to continuously do that, it doesn't work. Just because you're working more doesn't mean you're being more effective. That is a key piece. It is a core belief that people have that has to be broken, has to be shifted, because you can become that much more effective in the time periods that you have and actually get more done if you have the energy. And so that is the key component there. So that's one of the things that I take a look at. But there's a 9-point system that I really show with entrepreneurs that they have to focus on when it comes to their thoughts, their emotions, and their energy levels. And so I'll just use a prime example is energy is the most important resource that you have. It's not time like people say, and I'll just share a perfect example, is if you have an hour of spare time or whatever that is, a free time, but you don't have the energy to use it effectively, what happens? It goes to waste. And how many times have we worked our butts off in our business and then gone home in the evening, spending time with our families, for example, and we just can't unwind? Or we're just so exhausted, we don't have the energy to interact with our family at the level that we want to. That's why energy is so important. But here's why people don't have enough energy. And so I'm going to get into the science of this if you want to, kind of stick with me here, Rick, a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's important for people to understand this, is our brain is actually it's a resource pig. It actually consumes energy. It consumes about 20% of our daily calories. So it actually takes up energy to think. And so here's what you need to really realize is that this is how most people live their lives. We have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. 60 to 80,000 thoughts. We're not even aware of majority of those thoughts, obviously. Majority of those thoughts, 98% of them are unconscious thoughts. What we get in front of us are the conscious thoughts, and which is really interesting. But most of us, and I'm going to be very conservative here, especially if you're a go-getter, this is going to be a lot higher, is we spend, let's just say 50% of our time thinking about the past, things that we haven't done or things that we screwed up on or things that we overlooked, and thinking about the future, things that we need to get done, things that we haven't gotten done. Hey, I got to finish this, so I got to get to that. Right? That's what the go-getter life is like. That's what an entrepreneur's life is like.
Yes, it is.
Well, what ends up happening? You've just reduced your mental capacity by 50% just by focusing on the past and the future. So people say, Purdeep, well, shouldn't you be focused on the future? Yeah, you should be in certain time periods. So structure your day in the morning. Take out half an hour, 20 minutes, for example. Or, an hour out of every week. Or I meditate. So that's when I think about the future. I focus on the future in my meditation. But being present is important, because if you realize that your biggest impact, the most energy that you have, the impact that you have on your future is in this present moment, the ability for you to actually make impact is now. You're going to be like, I don't want to think about the future as much because now I'm actually focusing on stuff that I can't even impact right now. And it's a really interesting concept when you actually think about it and when you actually understand that, hey, if I can just focus my energy with what's in front of me right now and put everything I have into it, that's going to be the biggest benefit for my future.
And I think we all know that instinctively, but it's become harder and harder to do that. The shiny object syndrome is so much more prevalent with the internet. I mean, look at the way we're connecting. Yeah. It's so much easier to get distracted by emails, by, social media, because again, they told me I got to be creating content, all the time. So I got to focus on that. And then I got to go to respond to that. And then I got an email. Then I got so how do you deal with all that and stay present in the moment?
Yeah, it's really, really important. And I'm going to say, because I'm a total optimist, I'm a total innovation is my background. But I can tell you right now, the technology that we have is very destructive for people's brains. There's more and more neuroscience that's coming out that's saying, hey, look, your smartphone, the more you look at it, honestly, the dumber you're getting, because it's actually breaking neural pathways in your brain. And so I'm like when I coach people, I tell them, you got to take time. Like when you're in the evening at a certain period with your family, you got to shut your phone off or put it away. It's a non-negotiable, because you're building a pattern. We have to understand this. This is a reality of things, Rick. The people that have put together smartphones, the people that have put together Facebook and Instagram, the billionaires, we have to understand that they're doing it for a reason. And I'm telling you, because when I was at Stanford, for example, they picked the best people, the neuropsychologists and the psychologists, to help build these apps. They're smart people, and they build them so people get hooked. And so it is an addiction. So we have to understand that. We have to stand up and say, okay, what is actually healthy for us? And not just say, well, everybody else is doing it. Everybody else is carrying around their smartphones all the time, or sitting, having dinner with their spouse and on their smartphones. No, just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean that you should be doing it. Just because everybody else's kids at the age of 8 years old have smartphones doesn't mean that your kids need to have smartphones at the age of 8 years old. We have to understand that there's a detriment to technology when you get addicted to it. So that is one thing. Meditation, I tell everybody that I work with, I get them into meditation because that's very important. And science has shown, if you do 12 minutes of meditation every single day, it actually starts to restructure your brain, the neuroplasticity of your brain. Your brain actually starts to become more synchronized. And so you start to be more focused, for example, become actually more in the present moment. So these are little things that we can do to actually do that. And just pure understanding is important, Rick, as well. When you understand that there's no such thing as multitasking, it's a complete myth. It's called multi-switching. You're switching between tasks. And I want you to think about it from this perspective. You're going down a super highway. It's a 12-lane highway each way. That's how your brain is. But it's billions of lanes. And when every time you multitask, you're taking traffic and you're just sideswiping that traffic that's going, top to bottom. You're sideswiping from left to right. And it's going in a completely different direction. And what do you need to do to actually get that back on track? Well, it's got to go up, all these roundabouts and merge back into traffic. Well, that takes a bunch of energy. It consumes a bunch of energy. And so when people say, multitasking, I'm good at it, or it helps me do it, no, it's actually not. It doesn't work. You can multitask things like running and actually listening to music, for example, because your brain has already been pre-programmed to run. You don't have to think about it really. But things like, if you're answering emails, if you're on your smartphone, doing that kind of stuff, talking, it doesn't work. Those are just simple things that you can do to actually be more present.
Yeah, and that's that's a tough cycle to break with younger people who have grown up not knowing a life without cell phones and those kind of distractions, and they grew up trying to multitask, and so it's probably a topic for another episode. But real quick, I want to ask you. You talked about meditation and using that as a tool. Can you give us just a real quick idea or a tip on how people if somebody says, "Well, I don't know how to meditate," what are you talking about?
Yeah, I get that all the time. And so I tell people to start off small, just like anything else. If you've never worked out and you're going to the gym, you're not going to go in there and pump an hour's worth of weights your first time. You got to go in and do at least a minute of it. And it's a simple thing. So the best thing that you can do, and one of the fundamental pieces, is really closing your eyes, because most of the stimuli that we take in life that gets our brain activated is through sight. And just by shutting your eyes, you actually calm your brain down. And so go in a dark room, shut your eyes. You can even put on nice music if you have a meditation track that you like. But just start off small. As simple as just closing your eyes for a minute in a dark spot, or even at your desk with lights off and just closing your eyes. And then you just slowly build on that. And you just do it maybe an extra 60 seconds every 2 days, or a week, or however long you think. Because a lot of people are anxious these days. A lot of people can't take it. But you slowly build, and you're going to realize, I promise you, if you continue to do this, if you stick with it, because I've never seen it not work, you're going to have that moment where you're going to feel total peace, and you're going to be like, oh my God, I've never felt this before. Like, you're going to be in such, people call it a Zen state. You're going to feel whatever it is, a state of being, total love, for example. You're going to feel that state, and you're going to be like, I want more of this. It's like the weight is lifted off your shoulders. So imagine just not thinking about bills or what you have to do next, or people talking to you, or your smartphone going off. You're just in total peace. You're in total comfort with yourself. So that is the simple way to start. It's just closing your eyes, or even simple mindfulness techniques, which you can just do at your desk, and just focus on your breath. Deep breaths in, deep breaths out. Maybe 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. Slowly, gradually increase that to 4 seconds, to 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, to 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. So you can build on that. And what will eventually happen is you're gonna start training your brain. So that's ultimately what you're doing, is training your brain to be more relaxed, because everything else in society is training your brain to do the opposite.
Yeah. And I like the breathing thing. I do a little bit of yoga, not as much as I should, but I do a little bit of yoga. And I, thinking back to a particular session in our yoga studio where they had us doing some of the deep breathing stuff. And at the end, I told the instructor, I said, this is really cool. I was kind of describing what you're talking about. And I said, this is really cool, but I keep falling asleep at the end of class. But yet I can't go home and go to bed at night and fall asleep like that. She says, well, think about it. What are you doing here? I'm like, well, you got us doing this breathing and stuff. She's like, hello, maybe try that when you're going to bed at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whatever, try some of this breathing when you're trying to fall asleep in bed. And when I did that, Purdeep, my sleeping in my bed changed. And it was like a world of difference in terms of versus, rather than laying there and got all this stuff spinning through your head. What am I going to do? The stuff you're talking about, looking forward, spinning in my head. And when I got that breathing that I had learned in the yoga studio and took it into the bedroom, just changed everything. But so great tip. Let's get this back a little bit to how you're helping your clients before we run out of time here. I want to be mindful of your time. What do you think in working with guys to help them through all of this? What do you think, or what are you seeing that are some of the biggest mistakes maybe the guys are making in trying to get their business going or get it to the next level? Yeah,
biggest mistake by far is doing it on their own. And I've seen that because a lot of people that are in business, I'm going to say probably 8 out of 10, don't have a full understanding of how to run a business. And so if you don't have a full understanding of how to run a business and you're trying to do it on your own, it's going to take you that much longer, and it's going to be that much more headaches, and you're actually going to be losing that much more in terms of opportunity cost. You have to understand businesses are growing fast these days, and businesses get put out of business real fast. So the faster you get to that point where your business is actually growing and scaling and getting that much further ahead of your competition, the better. So that is the biggest challenge I see, because a lot of guys don't want to open up and say, I'm lacking in this area. I don't have skills in this area. Or I just want to do it myself, because that's how we're built as men, right? We're inherently built to be independent and so have autonomy. And so that is the biggest thing I see from that standpoint. The other thing is really focusing on themselves, because every business owner is the business's biggest asset, but also the business's biggest roadblock. And so if you want to scale your business, if you think about this, truly think about this, you are that point of reference that scales your business. So when you build your skills, when you build your abilities, your capabilities internally, you actually are able to scale your business a lot faster and easier. So those are the two things, is people are so focused on strategies and systems that they forget to realize that they're the ones ultimately that are making the decisions. And so they need to up their skills. And that's when more, you can say, options become available. And people start to think from a different perspective. They start having a different, people say mindset, for example, and things pop up to them and say, okay, so this is a great idea. Whereas before they could never come up with those options before, because they had a limited knowledge set or skills or abilities or understanding.
This might be a little bit of a redundant question, but if you've got guy A and you've got guy B, all things being equal, education, access to resources, but guy A succeeds wildly where guy B struggles and continues to struggle. What is that missing link?
Okay, so at the surface level, here's what it is. Life and business is about two things: better decisions and better actions. That's what it is. And if we take a look at our day, it's all about making a decision and taking action. That's how we live our lives. And so the guy that executes versus the guy that doesn't, it's all about decisions. What decisions did that person make, and what actions did that person take? That's all it is. It's a series of better actions and better decisions that ultimately gets them there. Now, what is the root cause of that? That is actually a bigger question. It's a lot deeper, and it all comes down to self-mastery, because how you manage your thoughts, your emotions, and your energy actually impacts how you make decisions. So that's ultimately what it is the foundation is self-mastery, which actually there's a level in between your decisions, which is actually your stories. So your level of your thoughts, your level of emotions, and your level of energy, when they're aligned, you tell yourself better stories. You actually tell yourself empowering stories.
You're talking about self-stories.
Self-stories, or even business, like stories about life, because everything that we're doing in life is really a story. If you take a look at what you talk about to someone or what someone says to you, only about 5 to 10% of that is actually factual. Everything else is just a story. And so when you take a look at that, a person's story will tell you everything in terms of how they run their business or their life. So the self-stories I tell myself have to be empowering. But if I'm telling myself disempowering stories, that's exactly how I'm going to be making decisions. So here's how the brain works. The brain will not do anything outside of what it thinks it is. So if you tell yourself a story that I'm super successful, I'm super smart, I'm totally persistent, this is who I am, that's the story that you're telling yourself. Those are the decisions that you're going to make. But if you're telling yourself, I'm not quite decisive, I don't know if my skill's quite there, consciously or unconsciously, this is the crux here, because most people's stories are unconscious. Remember when I said 98% of our thinking is unconscious? Well, so are our stories. 98% of our stories are unconscious. If we don't know what our stories are unconsciously, then we're just making decisions blindly, and we wonder, okay, why am I continuously making the same mistake over and over again, or not seeing the growth? It's because of these stories that have been created because the self-mastery isn't there.
There's a great quote that I came across, and I'm curious to get your sense on it. Gracie Bonds Staples, she's a journalist, said this: self-esteem that is not backed by self-mastery becomes narcissism.
Yeah, I would say bang on, because I see this a lot. And so this is one of the other things that I see with men, is they put up this front, like everything's all good, they're all macho, they're all tough. Without a shadow of a doubt, I can put 10 men in a room, because I do this in my workshops and my seminars. And I can bet you anything, 8 out of 10 of those men will feel like they're not enough in some way, shape, or form. Whether they're not making enough money, for example, or their relationship isn't where they want it to be, but that's impacting them as a man, and they're feeling like they're not enough. They're feeling like they're insignificant. They don't have that pride level, for example. So you're absolutely right. That show is real. It happens. But on the underlying perspective, and I think this is an important thing for guys to realize, because our natural tendency is to say, okay, well, that guy has it all, right? And his life looks great. It doesn't mean that it is. Chances are 80% chance that he's feeling some of the same emotions that you are in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic to me, and I think we could go on forever about this. Bottom line is, it's about self-mastery, and we're not talking about narcissism. And narcissism, by the way, is right, that kind of excessive self-admiration, or that need for admiration. And so that's not what we're talking about here. This is about building your self-esteem through self-mastery, and that creates a different kind of man, a different kind of person. And we could take a lot of right-hand turns with that terminology and get some crazy stuff, but we won't. Let me ask you this. A guy, a business owner, a young entrepreneur, what should he be asking himself if he's thinking about working with somebody like you as a business coach, a business mentor?
Okay. So the biggest question is, if I continue to do what I'm doing right now, where will I be 12 months from now? That is the biggest question. That's a question I ask myself all the time. That's a question that I get my clients to ask themselves, or people that I work with in general. Because if what you're doing right now isn't going to get you the results you want in 12 months, then you have to do something different. And so stop burning out, because that's what's eventually going to happen if you continue to do the same thing, trying to look for different results. So ask yourself, at this pace, what I'm doing, will it get me the results that I'm looking for 12 months down the road, or even 24 months down the road?
Okay, good. Listen, I want to shift gears a little bit here before I let you go. You familiar with the Proust Questionnaire?
No, sorry. Which questionnaire?
The Proust Questionnaire. Marcel Proust was a French writer back in the early 1900s, and he had this list of questions, like 25 questions. I'm not going to ask you all those. But his thing was that by answering these questions, a person reveals his or her true nature.
Awesome.
They're harmless questions, really. I promise you that. They're pretty
simple.
Good to go. All right. Just like the first thing that comes to your mind is all you got to go with. Okay. You ready?
You bet.
All right. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Oh, love, peace, joy.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Love, peace, joy.
I like it. What is your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is not being around for my children or losing my children. Those I love my children like no tomorrow. And so not being there to guide them and lead them until they're at that right age because they're still young, or just, God forbid something happens, I'd be devastated for sure.
And the older you get, the more that becomes prevalent, and that's the thing that comes with age and wisdom and the self-mastery and everything else.
Yes, yeah.
All right. What is your current state of mind?
Right now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm super happy. I'm just excited to have this conversation with you.
Awesome. And I can see, for people listening, I can see Purdeep, and he's had a huge smile on his face the entire time. I'm digging the energy. What is the quality you most like in a person?
Oh, authenticity.
Explain.
Well, just someone that's just able to be themselves, that is able to express themselves, that doesn't feel afraid to be the person that they want to be. On top of that, I have a total admiration for people that follow their passion, that have a passion, that live it out regardless of whether it makes money or not. But if they have a talent and a skill and they're passionate about it, man, that just drives me, like, I get goosebumps thinking about that, because I've seen some very talented people. And it just amazes me.
Amen. I'm curious, and this isn't one of Proust's questions, but you are a mentor to others. Who are your mentors?
Oh, wow. My mentors, just people I look up to in general in life, for example. My grandfather was my mentor, and he's long gone. My father was my mentor as well. He passed away last year. And I look up to people like the Dalai Lama. He's a big mentor, in terms of just having that level of happiness, even though he's gone through such trauma in his life, is absolutely phenomenal. And even in reality, and this sounds silly, but even my children to a certain degree, because, with the work that I do and, and my mission to help people, sometimes I forget about the day-to-day stuff too, and just the simple things of being like a child. And I look to them, and it's just like they're teaching me stuff all the time. And they're grounding me every day. And so that to me is great, because I get to be a kid again as well, being around them.
And going back to, me being the old guy here, the older you get, the more joy you're going to get out of that. Because when your kids come back, in their late teens, early 20s, and they say something that you've been telling them for years that they wouldn't acknowledge, and then they say it, and you're like, man, they were listening. Yes. It's awesome.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Do you have a favorite author or a book that's on your nightstand right now that you're really digging?
Yeah. I forgot the name of the author, but The War of Art is right now my favorite book. It's something that sticks in my mind because it's for anyone out there that has a talent or wants to express their talent or wants to learn a talent. And when the world just kind of, puts up every barrier to resist that talent, it's an amazing book. I would highly recommend it for every person out there, because it makes you think in a completely different perspective. And it did that for me. The War of Art.
All right. Finally, Purdeep, what is your motto?
My motto? Oh, yeah. So my motto is really make this world a better place. That's my personal motto. So I think if we all just do something, because I truly believe that we're put on this earth for a reason. And so us just simply doing one thing for one other person has a massive ripple effect. So that's my goal. That's how I live my life, is really to be a better person, to give back as much as I can. And that's how I teach my children is I don't care if they're super educated. I don't care if they're wealthy, but I do care if they're good people. I do care if they're giving back and actually giving back to society, because that's how we make this world a better place.
Awesome. Purdeep, I think Marcel Proust would approve. Great job on that. Thanks for sharing. Listen, how can our listeners learn more about working with you?
Yeah, so you can go to purdeepsangha.com. That's my personal website. You can also go and check out the Male Entrepreneur podcast. And we just recently launched a YouTube channel. It's youtubeformen.com. You can check that out as well. And I'm more than happy if you reach out to me directly, because I get people sending out emails. I will respond personally as well, because I love that. So if you are either in a position where things are going great and you just want some insight, or things aren't going great and you're kind of in that tough spot, even if you feel like you might not even be in the position to financially to get insight or coaching or advice or whatever that is, feel free to reach out, because I will definitely reach back out and give you some insight to really take your business or life to a different level.
That's awesome. Purdeep Sangha, the mentor for men in business. Dude, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I truly appreciated this conversation and definitely enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome. That's a wrap for this episode of the Business Innovators Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Brown. And until next time, keep innovating.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.